Kalispera se όλους. My name is Spiridoula Dimitriou, and on behalf of the Greek community of Melbourne and Victoria, it is my great pleasure to warmly welcome you here tonight to this evening's Culture and History Seminar, which is an online-only event this evening, as it will be next week. I would like to begin by saying that the Greek community respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands upon which the Greek centre is located, the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. An anonymous donation in memory of Eleni Harris has made this seminar possible tonight. We extend our gratitude to this donor and hope that their memories of Eleni are comforting in her absence. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Michael Festas, and he addresses us from Athens. Dr. Festas' topic tonight is the Peloponnese during the Greek War of Independence. Dr. Festas was born in Athens in 1986 and is a graduate of the Department of History and Archaeology at the Faculty of Philosophy at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens, from where he has obtained undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. He completed his doctoral thesis titled The Settlements of the Peloponnese During the Greek Revolution, Space, Population and Habitation at the same university. Dr. Festas's research interests focus on the study of population history, settlements, and the geography of the Greek territory during the period of Ottoman rule and in modern times. Dr. Festas is an expert in the cartographic capabilities of GIS, that is, Geographic Information Systems, and has published articles on the history of settlements and the population of the Peloponnese during the revolution in both Greek and in international academic journals. He has worked as an external research associate on numerous projects at the Institute of Historical Research at the National Hellenic Research Foundation and the Department of History and Archaeology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. Dr. Festas' bilingual book that is relevant to tonight's seminar is titled Settlement Patterns in the Peloponnese During the Greek Revolution, can be accessed online from the digital library of the Research Centre of Humanities, and it's part of the 1821 Digital Archive project in Greece. Do look it up so you can look at the maps that we're going to see tonight in more detail and at your own leisure. Now, just a few brief words about tonight's subject. Between 1928 and 1830, the Greek administration undertook the collection of statistical data concerning the population and settlements of the Peloponnese. Through systematic research, which involved the identification and mapping of approximately 1,800 place names, it became possible to reconstruct the demographic landscape of the Peloponnese at the conclusion of the Greek Revolution. Dr. Festas' presentation tonight will define key characteristics of settlement distribution and population patterns in the Peloponnese across this period. He will also examine specific issues such as the impact of military conflicts on settlements and the movement of population between places at this time. And this is relevant to, he will talk about the Christian population and the Muslim populations of the day. The fundamental features of the rural economy, including agriculture and livestock farming during the years of the insurrection, will also be considered, and the significance of studying the etymological origins of place names before they were renamed by the Greek state following the establishment of the modern Greek state. I would like to welcome Dr. Festas to our company tonight, and I hand him over to you now.
Thank you, Spiridoula. Good afternoon. Kalispera. I would like to thank the Greek community of Melbourne for inviting me. It's a very great honor to be with you tonight. And I would like to especially thank Nick Dallas and Kostas Avlonitis for the communication we had. With today's presentation, I will briefly introduce the findings that emerged in the context of my doctoral dissertation, which was conducted at the School of Philosophy of the University of Athens. I will begin by providing a brief historical and historiographical framework regarding the available historical sources on the population of the Peloponnese during the Greek War of Independence, as well as a very concise presentation of my research methodology. Next, I will outline the main aspects of the geographical and administrative division of the Peloponnese during the war and present some quantitative and cartographic data on the distribution of settlements and population. Following this, I will briefly discuss 3 case studies. The first focuses on the characteristics of the agrarian economy, exploring how they can be studied and what conclusions can be drawn. The second examines the impact of the war on the mobility of the population, both Christian and Muslim. And the third is an attempt to analyze the significance of settlement toponyms with an emphasis on those settlements that had Turkish names before the revolution. In regard to the population of Greece in a period prior to the establishment of the monarchy, we possess only certain pieces of information left to us by the administration of Capodistrias. Although these do not provide a reliable certainty of an accurate census, nor can they serve as a term of comparison with the population today, they do contribute, however faintly, to an understanding of the state of Greece's population in 2 crucial periods, namely 1821, 1828, and 9. With these words, Alexandros Mansoulas, head of the Public Economy Office at the Ministry of the Interior, commented on both the very existence and the reliability of the available demographic data for the Greek territory before the establishment of the Greek state. The year is 1867. Just 6 years earlier, 1861, according to Mansoulas, the most accurate of all statistical collections had been carried out, or in the terminology of the time, the politographic. This is the term of collecting data, including mainly demographic data. The same document contrasts the methods of data collection. By the mid-19th century, the primary advantage of the entire endeavor lay in the fact that the results were largely based on official records. In earlier periods, particularly during the Capodistrian era, the collection of information had been assigned to local, provisional, administrative bodies, resulting mainly in an unsystematic process, deficiencies in content, and consequently reduced reliability. Nevertheless, the limited reliability of the demographic data collected during the Capodistrian period and their inability to serve as a point of comparison with corresponding data from the 1860s or even later does not in any way diminish their significance. This is because these records constitute the only comprehensive documentation about the population and the settlements of the Peloponnese during this time. As such, they can provide, even faintly, as Mansoulas observes, valuable insights into a historically crucial period. Indeed, at the end of the Greek War of Independence, the Capodistrian administration undertook and successfully completed the collection of a body of statistical information concerning the liberated Greek territories. This including, among other things, a record of settlements and population data. The Capodistrian demographic survey would later serve as a primary reference for the corresponding data published by 1834 by the French expedition to the Peloponnese, a team of scholars that had disembarked in the Peloponnese in 1829 to conduct a wide range of documentation efforts. These 2 census-like sources form the core of my documentary material, processed in the framework of my research which aimed to reconstruct the settlement and demographic landscape of the Peloponnese during the Greek Revolution. Additionally, the study has drawn upon a wide range of written and spatial sources. Briefly summarized, the written sources include various statistical surveys conducted by the Capodistrian administration in the Peloponnese, travel accounts of European travelers, memoirs of Greek fighters, newspapers, pre- and post-independent population censuses, official state demographic records, and administrative material. The spatial sources, on the other hand, encompass historical maps, as well as digital geographic data, primarily produced by the Greek administration, such as settlement geographic datasets, toponymic repositories, and geo-indexes. The objective of the research has been to address historiographical gaps identified in the lead up to the bicentennial anniversary of the Greek Revolution. These gaps included the need for studies related to demographic history and settlement patterns, an issue articulated with clarity by prominent Greek historians. Within the context of our research, the study of population focuses on spatial distribution of demographic figures and consequently of the settlements. The central research question has been, it's simple. Where was the population of the Peloponnese located during the years of the revolution? How did the research respond to this question? The census sources contain spatial information, population figures, usually in the form of households, numbers, correspond to specific place names. It was precisely this spatial geographic dimension of the sources that our research sought to process and analyze in depth. By identifying and mapping approximately 1,800 toponyms included in the sources, a quarter of which have since been renamed, we are able to reconstruct and describe the fundamental characteristics of the settlement networks of the Peloponnese at the end of the Greek War of Independence. The geographical and administrative structure of the Peloponnese played a significant role in shaping settlement patterns and population distribution. The region's fragmented terrain, mountains, plains, river networks influenced both historical habitation and demographic patterns. The Peloponnese was administratively divided into 7 regions. We are in 1828, each comprising multiple provinces. You see the map. In Argolis, the main provinces included Argos, Nafplio, Katon Achaie, and Corinth. Achaia encompassed Kalavrita, Patras, and Vostitsa. It's the modern-day Aegio. While Ilis was divided in the provinces of Gastouni and Pyrgos. Upper Messenia consisted of Arcadia, modern-day Kyparissia, Neocastro, Navarino, Methoni, and Koroni, whereas Lower Messenia included Nisi, modern-day Messini, Kalamata, Emlakica, scattered villages all around the place. You see the map and you may understand. Androusa, Mikromani, and Leondari. And Western Sparta, the western part of Mani. Laconia comprised Eastern Sparta, Mistras and Prastos and Monevaskia. Finally, Arcadia, in the center of the Peloponnese, was structured around the provinces of Fanari, Agios Petros, Tripoli, and Karitena. The map reveals the following. Many administrative regions of the Peloponnese had approximately the same boundaries during the Greek War of Independence as they did later in the period of the Greek state. Additionally, one striking observation is that an administrative region could lack geographical continuity. Take, for example, the case of the southwestern Peloponnese in present-day Messenia, where multiple settlements and the borders of several provinces are found within the same geographical area. This administrative framework reflects both the geographical diversity and historical significance of these regions during the period under study. The region's fragmented geography is defined by its mountains and plains. The Syria mountain range and Arachneo dominate northeastern Peloponnese, enclosing the fertile Argolic Peninsula. The Corinth and Xylocastro plain ranks as the 8th largest in the region. Achaia's landscape is marked by the mountain Helmos, Panachaiko, and Erymanthos, along with great rivers such as Pyros and Parapyros. Ilis contain 3 of the 10 largest plains, including Gastouni Lechena, Alfios, Agoulinitsa, and Zaharo, forming nearly a quarter of modern-day Ilis. Lower Messenia features the vast Messenian plain, nourished by the Pamissos River. The Taigetos range extended 70 kilometers with 130 peaks above 1,000 meters, dominated Laconia, alongside the Parnon Mountain. Arcadia, centrally located, encompassed the Tripoli Basin and the second largest lowland in the Peloponnese, surrounded by Menalo, Partheni, and Artemisio mountains. These all natural features significantly shaped settlement distribution before, during, and after the revolution. At the end of the Greek War of Independence, estimates suggest that the Christian population ranged from 308,805 to 336,366, while the region had housed approximately 40,000 Muslims before the conflict. One of the most striking finds of the research is that the fertile lowlands of the Peloponnese did not necessarily attract the highest concentration of inhabitants. Conventional wisdom suggests that favorable environmental conditions, such as soil fertility, access to water, and temperate climate, should correlate with higher population densities. However, historical demographic data reveal a more complex pattern. At the end of the Greek War of Independence, approximately 152,000 people resided below 400 meters in elevation, while 172,000 lived at higher altitudes. Within the lowest elevation zone, 0 to 100 meters, the total population was around 83,000, of whom roughly 37,500 were concentrated in 10 major settlements exceeding 1,000 inhabitants each, representing 45% of this altitude band's total population. Notably, several of these densely populated settlements emerged as refugees for displaced persons affected by the war. For instance, the case of Leonidio, Eastern Peloponnese, which absorbed a significant portion of the population of the war-ravaged Prastos village, exemplifies how conflict reshaped settlement patterns. Outside of the larger towns, approximately 406,000 people lived in rural areas below 100 meters in altitude. Calculating the population density within this band yields a low figure of 16 inhabitants per square kilometer, indicating a relatively dispersed rural settlement structure. A further spatial analysis of settlements above 700 meters challenges the assumption that high-altitude locations were marginal in terms of habitation. You see the map once again. On the contrary, this zone includes regions above Tripoli and Megalopolis, housed a substantial population of over 1,000 people accounting for nearly 1/3 of the total Peloponnesian population at the time. This finding underscores the importance of mountainous regions as centers of habitation. Moreover, as elevation increases, the average population per settlement also rises, suggesting a clustering of larger population in fewer, more centralized, high-altitude settlements. For instance, below 400 meters, rural settlements had an average population size of approximately 130 inhabitants, whereas above this threshold, the average population per settlement gradually increased, reaching 600 inhabitants per settlement in the 1,000-meter range, the high altitude. Furthermore, what is now documented for our research, both cartographically and through analysis, is the fact that the distribution of settlements, and more significantly of the population, is largely concentrated in the geographical areas defined by the presence and direction axis of the major mountain ranges of the Peloponnese. This density originates from the northern mountain parts of the Peloponnese and extends southward and slightly westward, encompassing in terms of administrative organizations the provinces of Kalavrita and Karitana, which were the most populous regions of the Peloponnese during this period. From there, the pattern appears to branch in two directions. Eastward towards Parnon, this is the mountain of Parnon, if you may see this, which relatively few but large settlements are observed, and southward into Taigetos, where settlements and population density appear to converge. Additionally, two other areas emerge as well populated. The first is the Messinian plain around Pamissos River, and last but not least, the Mani Peninsula, one of the most well-inhabited areas of the Peloponnese during this time. So, our first case study. The fundamental features of the rural economy, or the Kalivia settlement. The Greek War of Independence was a decade-long conflict during which the rural population continued to a greater or lesser extent to live and work on the land, engaging in both agriculture and livestock farming. The first case study focuses on the Kalivia settlements during the years of the revolution. The aim here is to examine how agricultural and pastoral activities, thus the main activities of the population, left tangible imprints on the landscape, arguing that the rural settlement network should not be analyzed solely in terms of its geographical distribution, but also as a system of productive sites essential to the agricultural and pastoral economy. 2 decades ago, historian Vasilis Panagiotopoulos outlined the economic space of Greeks during the Ottoman rule, emphasizing agricultural production, semi-nomadic pastoralism, and craft production. This study, our study, builds on this approach by focusing on the material landscape of agricultural and pastoral activities. A key source for that is the map produced by the French expedition of the Morea at the end of the revolution. This historical map provides crucial insights beyond our main sources, the textual sources, as it categorizes inhabited areas into villages, hamlets, isolated houses, inns, towers, and kalivia, or huts. This categorization underscores the diversity of rural settlements patterns. The map records 101 Kalivia, of which 92 do not appear in our written census data. This discrepancy between both suggests that Kalivia, often situated near primary settlements, were not separately documented, despite serving as active components of the rural settlement system. Kalivia is rarely the focus of historical studies in general. Available research stems primarily for geographers, particularly German scholars who examined Greek settlement patterns from the late 19th to the mid-20th century. The existence of Kalivia, however, predates the Ottoman era and can be traced back to Byzantine times. A contemporary account by British traveller William Leake at the beginning of the 19th century provides insights into their function. Describing the remains of ancient Mantinia, very close to Tripoli, he notes that all its inhabitants lived in two huts, part of a Turkish-owned estate. Leake defines Kalivia as small, dependent settlements for laborers, located at distances inconvenient for daily commuting. This interpretation aligns with the French map's description of Kalivia as winter villages, dependent on higher altitude settlements. To validate this historical description, the study maps the Kalivia recorded in the first expedition charts onto a modern GIS map. You see the map in your screens. The spatial distribution of Kalivia indicates a concentration in the central and northeastern Peloponnese, appearing in both highland and lowland areas. Their altitude varies from near sea level up to 1,000 meters, with an average elevation of 400 meters, closely matching the mean altitude of the identified settlements in general. Of the 101 documented Kalivia, 64 are linked to known villages, averaging 700 meters in altitude. These reference settlements were typically well populated, averaging over 500 people, significantly higher than the general settlement mean of 180 residents. The spatial analysis reveals an average distance of 10 kilometers between Kalivia and their parent settlements, with altitude differences ranging from negligible to nearly 1,000 meters. Several case studies illustrate the evolution of Kalivia into permanent settlement. In central Arcadia, the village of Philia had 3 Kalivia locations recorded as Phileica Kalivia by Leake, the traveler. These sites later evolved into distinct settlements, with one named Zevgolatio, a term indicating agricultural activity in Greek. Similarly, in the Kalavrita region, the Mazi settlement had 2 Kalivia locations, one of which became the present-day large village of Klitoria. In northeastern Peloponnese, a cluster of Kalivia in Corinthia appears to correspond with seasonal pastoral activity. This area between Examilia and Kechre was documented pre-revolutionarily as extensive pasture land. This suggests that Kalivia in this region were probably linked to semi-nomadic livestock farming, a practice confirmed in later sources from the interwar period. The evidence suggests that Kalivia function as integral elements of a broader agricultural and pastoral economy, sometimes evolving into permanent settlements, while others disappeared. Their spatial distribution, toponymic persistence, and integration into agricultural networks underscores the necessity of incorporating GIS analysis into historical research on settlement patterns. To sum up, the study of Kalivia settlements illustrates the rural habitation in the revolutionary Peloponnese was far more fluid and adaptive than traditionally assumed, shaped by environmental constraints, economic opportunities, and demographic shifts. Our second case study, the impact of military conflicts on settlements and population mobility, both Christian and Muslim. The Greek Revolution brought widespread destruction to settlements, with villages burned, guerrilla warfare, population displacements, and prolonged sieges affecting nearby the whole peninsula. This raises a key research question. What was the impact of the war on settlement abandonment in the region? Information on the topic is generally fragmented and primarily found in textual sources such as the memoirs of Greek fighters. Taking a long-term perspective, British geographer Malcolm Wagstaff identifies three types of settlement abandonment in the Peloponnese between the 17th and the 19th centuries. Temporary desertion, a settlement is abandoned for a period before being re-inhabited. Interim desertion, a brief period of abandonment before resettlement. And permanent desertion, the settlement is abandoned indefinitely. For the period of the revolution, Wagstaff argues that interim desertion was the most prevalent form of settlement abandonment. Contemporary sources and memoirs provide vivid accounts of these events. When Ibrahim Pasha forces invaded Western Peloponnese, for example, the attack was followed by the destruction of Pyrgos town. As recorded in Greek historical accounts, after the enemy crossed the Alphios River and entered Pyrgos, they disappeared into the villages of the plains. Between late 1825 and the spring of 1826, same sources describe the burning of Gastuni and the plundering of the Ilia vast plain. One account states, the enemies who advanced into Gastuni and Pyrgos roamed the villages of the plain, burning and looting. Further raids occurred in April 1827, forcing local population to flee. A contemporary source once again described how the unfortunate people of Ilis, weak, unprepared, and unprotected, sought refuge in the mountains, fortified locations, and nearby small islands. This pattern of population displacement to higher altitude areas during invasion was already evident during the first attack of Gastuni, when sources report that the entire province's population fled to the ravines and the heights of Mount Erymanthos for safety. The brief example discussed for the Western Peloponnese highlights the main pattern concerning the fate of the rural Christian population during the revolution, namely the phenomenon of interim desertion of settlements. In other words, villagers would flee their home, seek refuge in mountainous areas, and return once the Ottoman attacks had stopped. Thus, although many villages were burned and destroyed, they were almost always re-inhabited by the original inhabitants. But what happened to the Muslims of the Peloponnese? According to the prevailing historiographical interpretation, in Ottoman territories, cities and administrative centers were predominantly inhabited by Muslims, while the rural countryside was mainly Christian. This is the main division. The urban-rural dichotomy appears to have largely applied to the revolutionary and pre-revolutionary Peloponnese as well. As mentioned earlier, most sources agree that before the outbreak of the revolution, approximately 40,000 Muslims lived in the peninsula. At this point, travel accounts become particularly valuable for studying individual settlements, especially in cities, since most Greek sources typically record only approximate, as the map, Muslim population figures at the provincial levels. The map you see illustrates the pre-revolutionary distribution of Muslims across the provinces and regions of the Peloponnese, and it is based on a Greek source from 1828, though this source likely overestimates the Muslim population. At the beginning of the revolution, the majority of the Muslim population sought refuge in Tripoli, the capital of Ottoman Peloponnese, where they were massacred after the city fell to Greek forces. Numerous foreign travelers passed through Tripoli during the revolutionary period, recording their impressions. Indicatively, we mention the case of John Hartley, a British clergyman and missionary who visited the city in 1828. He writes, in Tripolitza, the capital, the work of demolition had been complete. Not only was the green grass grown amidst the ruins of the palace of the Pashas of the Morea, but every mosque, every church, every dwelling, and even every wall had been thrown down. I write amidst the ruins of Tripolitza. Few places afford more scope for serious reflection. View it 7 years ago in 1821, filled with a population secure and numerous, the abode of base pashas and every rank of the continuity. Here the proud Turk stalked along in his fancied greatness, little dreaming of the terrible overthrow which so speedily awaited him. Then, behold Tripolitza, suddenly filled with alarm and apprehension, crowded with refugees, so as probably to contain within its walls 40,000 persons, and enduring a blockade of 7 months. Next, the tremendous catastrophe. Thousands upon thousands are slaughtered, thousands are reduced to slavery, the streets literally flow with blood. And we move on to our third case study. Last but not least, the etymological origins of place names prior to the renaming process carried out by the Greek state. The settlements with Turkish place names. A characteristic of this statistical data presented is the integration of spatial or geographic information. Population indicators often represented by the number of families linked to specific toponyms. Through the identification and mapping of these place names, it was found that 144 toponyms originate from the Turkish language, constituting 8% of the total. While this may seem like a small portion, it represents approximately 1 in 10 toponyms found in the sources, a thing that requires further investigation. So the central question posed in our research is whether these toponyms, beyond their Turkish linguistic origin, exhibit distinctive features related to their geographical distribution, population size, that would classify them as a distinct category of settlements. Among the 144 Turkish origin toponyms, the majority, 116, derive from anthroponyms, often accompanied by administrative titles, Turkish titles, such as Agas, Pasas, Çavuşis, Efendis, and Beys, reflecting thus Ottoman governance structure. In terms of mapping, the majority of these toponyms were successfully located, while some of them, about 20, remain uncertain due to limited or absent data, both textual and geographic. The study identifies notable absences. You see the map of Turkish toponyms in northern and eastern Peloponnese, and especially in the Mani Peninsula. However, the highest concentration is found in Messenia, this region, particularly in the plains surrounding the Pamissos River and near Koronis Fortress. Other clusters appear in the Megalopolis Plateau in the center, south of Tripoli, Tegea region, and in the coastal plains of Corinthia, Laconia. Additionally, these are scattered occurrences in northwestern Peloponnese around Pinios River. This is the area of Pinios River, as well in the central Peloponnese, some of them, and in Nafplio area. To determine the historical continuity of these toponyms, a comparative analysis was conducted between Ottoman and Venetian sources. This comparison revealed that 60% of these toponyms predate the second Ottoman occupation of the Peloponnese, 1715, while 40% emerged during this period. So despite possible omissions in the Venetian records, this distribution suggests that the most Turkish origin toponyms were already established by the late 15th to 17th century. The research further examined population size and elevation levels to determine whether Turkish origin toponyms correspond to specific settlement patterns. On average, settlements with Turkish names had smaller population, with 10 fewer families per settlement compared to other settlements. In general, Turkish named settlements were more common in lowland areas, with an average elevation of about 140 meters, lower than other settlements. A significant number of these settlements appear to have been associated with Ottoman land ownership, particularly the large Ottoman estates or Tsiflikia. Historical accounts suggest that many settlements with Turkish names in regions like Corinth corresponded to estates owned by Muslim landholders. Some sources from the early 19th century confirm that many agricultural settlements classified as Tsiflikia were inhabited by Christians but remained under Turkish administrative influence. Following the Greek War of Independence, many of those settlements underwent transformations. Some were abandoned, while others persisted, but with changed population compositions. Notably, many of the settlements near Ottoman fortresses, Koroni, Methoni, Nafplio, seems to disappear from the sources because they were depopulated. In other cases, census data suggest a decline in population sizes among newer settlements that emerged in the 18th century. The analysis of Turkish toponyms in the Peloponnese reveals that these settlements form a distinct historical and geographical group. Their distribution outside major Ottoman strongholds, castles mainly, their demographic characteristics, and their land tenure pattern suggest a strong connection to Ottoman agrarian structures and settlement policies. Additionally, the research of these settlements highlights the importance of linguistic continuity in identifying historical land use and ownership patterns. To sum up, the study of settlement patterns and population distribution in the Peloponnese during the Greek War of Independence offers crucial insights into the demographic and geographic dynamics of the period. Despite the limitation of early statistical sources, the combination of census data, travel accounts, memoirs, historical maps, and modern geographic information systems has enabled a reconstruction of the region's inhabited landscape at a turning point in Greek history. One of the central findings of the research is the significant role of geographical features in shaping population distribution. Contrary to the assumption that fertile lowlands attracted the highest density of inhabitants, the study reveals that a substantial portion of the population resided in high-altitude settlements. The clustering of settlements along major mountain ranges, particularly in the provinces of Kalavrita, Karytena, Taigetos, highlights the impact of natural geography in population distribution. Another key aspect of the study is the impact of warfare on settlement structure and mobility. The destruction of villages, displacement of population, and the consolidation of larger settlements due to forced migration altered the demographic composition of the Peloponnese. As noted, on the one hand, in the rural countryside, Christians temporarily abandoned their settlements and returned to them after the end of the war. On the other hand, the Muslims, who primarily lived in fortified towns and administrative centers, sought refuge in Tripoli, where they were ultimately exterminated. Additionally, the study highlights the significance of Kalivia, small rural settlements, which served as integral components of the agricultural and pastoral economy. These structures, often overlooked in historical narratives, played a crucial role in seasonal habitation and land use. Their presence, as documented in the French scientific expedition of the Morea, illustrates a fluid and adaptive settlement system that was closely tied to economic activities such as farming and livestock grazing. As far as the long-term transformation of the rural landscape, some of these Kalivia became permanent settlements, while others were deserted and disappeared from the map. Finally, the examination of Turkish origin toponyms further sheds light on the historical continuity of settlement structure. The analysis reveals that many of these place names, primarily linked to Ottoman administrative and land ownership structures, persisted beyond the war and into the early years of the independent Greek state. Their geographic distribution, concentrating in certain regions, such as Messenia and Corinth, reflects patterns of Ottoman land management and settlement organization. The research also underscores the role of toponyms as indicators of historical land use and ownership, reinforcing the need for systematic historical and linguistic analysis in the study of settlement history. In conclusion, the study of settlement patterns and population distribution within the Peloponnese during the Greek Revolution demonstrates the complexity of historical habitation in a time of a profound social and political upheaval. By integrating spatial and written sources, this presentation aimed at providing an understanding of how geography, conflict, and economy activity shaped the region's demographic landscape. By the end of the Greek War of Independence, the modern settlement network of the Peloponnese had been established, with the population primarily residing in semi-mountainous and mountainous areas. This pattern would change after the founding of the Greek state, as the population began to move to lower altitudes and new settlements were created within the framework of the new institutional, political, administrative, and economic order. These settlement patterns remained largely unchanged until the Second World War II. However, from the 1950s onward, the population of the Peloponnese increasingly migrated to urban centers, particularly Athens, while some also emigrated abroad. It was the beginning of a new era for the Morea Peninsula. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Festas. There's so much there to talk about. I was really, lots of questions have come to mind, so they're in no particular order. Can I ask you about the first census material that was collected during the Capodistrian time? Do we know what type? Were they basically just counting heads, or were they asking people what religion they belonged to or what ethnicity? I understand the Turkish Muslim population suffered greatly, and the new modern state had the nationalism involved with that also would have meant, let's say, in my perception, everyone, did they consider whoever was left behind Christian? Was there any diversity built into that census? It shows us, this question prompts, in my mind, how important the writings of early travellers were, because they often, you gave the example of the Kalivia, which automatically showed a diversity in the landscape. So just, what did those first censuses look like? What were they interested in?
Yes, Capodistrian administration namely wanted to collect statistical data. With the term statistical data during this period, a lot of things are included. So, on the one hand, it is about the population. And when we are talking about the population, it's about the number of families. Each family at that time averages about 5 people. And at the same time, the Capodistrian administration wanted to make a kind of a cadastre for the Greek territories. This is why in these censuses coexist population data and information about the agricultural production, the size of some estates, and in general, a need to know the liberated area. It's a very fragmented source in terms of data, because as you may see earlier, it took about 3 years to collect all this material from 1828 to 1830. So it's a vast data, but really fragmented and requires reconstruction. Some years later, the French expedition took this data and added some new information. So they are pretty similar, but they do have differences. So these are our main sources. These sources do not include the division about the between Muslims or Christians.
Okay.
These we know it from other sources mainly. We do have some general figures, but it is mostly a census type source.
It's politographic.
What it's?
It was politographic.
Politographic. The term politographic, yes, it's what we call today statistical.
Yeah, but your study,
includes a lot of things.
Yeah, your study is fantastic because it brings the geographic matter with this statistical matter. So it's fantastic. We've got 2 questions, Dr. Festas. I could keep going, but I'm not going to be greedy. So Leon, hello. No, so Christos Fifis asks, was there any similar census taken for the Aegean Islands and Rumeli?
It's a very nice question, especially for Rumeli. Things are even worse than in the Peloponnese. We lack a lot of information. This is because of the very mountainous terrain. We do have actually very few information in the Capodistrian censuses. Very, very few and general information regarding the population before and after the war. In the Aegean Islands, the situation is better because in the Aegean Islands, there were already a tradition of recording the population within the local communities. So we do have some better material. If you want, I will, this is all open access. It's a printed census. So I can forward this to you later, and probably any of you can see the material. We are talking about the liberated areas, the Peloponnese, Rumeli, Central Greece, and the Aegean Islands. So it's a very nice question.
Thank you.
If we do have, yes.
No, I'm thanking Christos Fifis for that question. The next question we have is, do you have statistics of the total number of the population of the Peloponnese during 1821 and the number of Christian Greeks, Romii, and the Christian Arvanites?
As I told you earlier, we do have only general estimations about the population.
Okay.
So what we can understand from the general trends and the numbers we have, this indicates that roughly we may say that before the revolution, we have about 450,000. So it's in general, both Christian and Muslims. And after the war, all the Muslims, 40,000, were slaughtered. Some of them may change religion in order to save themselves. It was a common practice, especially for the women who were enslaved. They tended to change religion in order to liberate themselves. And as for the Arvanites population, we do not have enough numbers about them. We know the regions they inhabited, and they came in the Peloponnese, firstly, from the beginning of the 15th century, but a lot of them came in the Peloponnese at the end of the 18th century. They were not. Again, these people, these Albanians came at the end of the 18th century, was Muslim Albanians. Already Albanian or Arvanites population existed in the Peloponnese in certain areas such as Corinth, Nafplio, some places in Messenia from the beginning of the 15th century. The beginning of the 15th century is almost the beginning of the Ottoman occupation of the Peloponnese. It is the end of the Byzantine era and the beginning of the Ottoman era for the peninsula. The term Romni is the term most of the times these people use to describe themselves.
Sure.
They said we are Romni, but they also said that we are Greeks. We are Greek people. This idea of being a Greek people comes earlier from what we call the Enlightenment, and this idea of building a national identity. So the term Greeks, Hellenes, is found in the texts and the sources in general.
Dr. Festas, we have a question from Leon Zembekis related to the issue of slavery. And Leon asks you, was slavery present in the Peloponnesian economy pre-Ottoman colonization, or did slavery occur when Ottoman occupation occurred?
It's also a nice question. What I have understand is that we cannot say that there is a slavery in a typical sense. But what I have understand is the fact that we have Christian population working in large Ottoman states for the Muslim landowners. They were not typically slaves. The fact was that they had to work on the one hand and to pay the taxes. They were sharecroppers, let's say. But we cannot say that we have to understand them as being slaves. The interesting thing, and what I have understand by examining all this data, is the fact that probably some people who were working for Ottoman landlords in settlements and large estates left all these settlements by the end of the war. So by the end of the Ottoman occupation. So this is why some small settlements, and probably they were found all around the Ottoman castles, Nafplio, the strong Ottoman castles, Nafplio, Methoni, Koroni. We have some settlements that seem to disappear by the end of the war.
So the larger, they were called Siflikia, weren't they? Was that the correct term?
Yeah, it's a Turkish term.
Yeah,
it's a wide term and includes most of the time a lot of things. Most of the time, Sifliki means a very large, a vast agricultural area, but sometimes it may reflect a small exploitation of lands owned by Muslims and Turkish landowners. They were typically lived in the castles, and they had their estates outside the castle. The land was in the hands of the Muslims, the majority of the land, but Christians could at the same time own their own land, but it was a smallest portion, and it was most of the times found in the higher altitudes. So the vast area, yes, the Christian property in terms of land owning was in the high altitudes. Why? The vast plains were in the hands of the Muslims. So this is why.
So which was the Peloponnese? The larger plains were in the Peloponnese, weren't they, as opposed to continental Greece? Steria lava. Is that right? Because
Peloponnese has it's a mountainous region, but it has some vast plains. But we have to imagine that these plains during this time were not always being capable of agricultural activities, because some of them probably were affected by malaria, eleunosia. So we have to understand how people lived in the lowlands.
Yes.
Because they were affected. So sometimes this is why these settlements are not so big. And some of them sometimes are seasonal. We have this idea of a fixed map, but if you go inside the sources, you understand the following, that people were always moving all around. From the higher altitudes to the plains. They were semi-nomads, not absolutely nomads. They were traveling in order to find jobs. They were craftsmen going around the Peloponnese. And we do have also a communication with central Greece, Roumeli, from the Corinthian Gulf, and the islands of the Ionian Sea.
Dr. Festas, I don't want to disappoint this member of the audience who asked a question previously related to the Christian Arvanites. The question is, there are some estimates of the number of a number of 80,000 Arvanites, Christians, in the whole of Greece. Have you got any estimates for that time?
I do not have specific data on that. But if we probably make a comparison of the most known Arvanites region settlements, Corinthia, Argolida, we may do some comparison and extract some specific numbers.
It's fascinating. We've gone past our time. There's much that I wanted to talk to you about. I don't want you to answer the question, but it's something that's come to my mind in terms of examination of geography and drawing conclusions about populations. I was thinking about old cemeteries as in the landscape, which may indicate how long a population had been in a region too. So anyway, lots to think about. Dr. Festas, thank you so much for a fascinating talk on an era that is very much on our minds since 21, and next year we've got the fall of Mythology. So the topic of the Greek War of Independence is going to keep being of interest of us right until 2030. So I hope you will do us the honour of coming back and talking more about your research, which I understand would be developing more and more.
Thank you very much. It was fascinating for me. And as I said at the beginning, it's an honour for me to be with you.
I'm just going to remind our audience about next week's seminar. It's on Greek music in America and will be presented by Tina Vukavalas, who will speak to us from Florida. She will profile the scope, practice, and development of Greek music in America and its relationship to ethnic identity. I hope you can all join us next week. Good night to all of you. And Dr. Festas, please come and talk to us once again on a very interesting topic. And I'm sure we wish you ongoing success with your very important research.
Thank you very much. Καληνύχτα και ευχαριστώ.
Παρακαλώ και καληνύχτα σε όλους.